Hello there, and good evening from the United Kingdom. It's Monday, the 8th of June, and it is 8 p.m. here in the UK, and it's very good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Teo Van Dor. I'm the executive producer of Time of the Sixth Sun. In the window below is Nikki Luna Williams, the writer, director, producer of this amazing movie and series. And our guest this evening is Jae Mather, joining us from all the way on the west coast of Canada. So good to have you with us, Jae. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
It's great to have you with us. Thank you so much. We just had one of those beautiful moments where the technical gremlins, that everything is, as much as you prepare, nothing's quite working, and then 1 minute before we went live, we're like, okay, everything's working. Now we're all good. We're all good. We're good to go. So before we start introducing Jae, what I'd love to do is just to bring up this slide that talks a little bit about how you can support Jae and the work that he does. Now we're going to hear this evening about the Carbon Free Group, of which he also sits on the board. And if you'd like to go and find out more about Jae, all of these links, by the way, are in the description of this live chat that we're having with you. He's also on LinkedIn, and he's got a group on Facebook called Sustainability Quotes. And if you type that Sustainability Quotes into Facebook, then you'll find that group that he runs. So I'm going to show this slide again at the end of the presentation. And we have a movie, if you're just joining us for the first time, called Time of the Sixth Sun. It's a 108-minute beautiful cinematic journey featuring over 70 wisdom keepers, Indigenous elders and thought leaders, with a beautiful soundtrack, 16 or 18 different tracks in there. It's a real beautiful cinematic journey that you go on with Time of the Sixth Sun, all about the evolution of human consciousness. And if you'd like to rent that, that's available. We have a full 19.5 digital access package, and every week when we're doing these live broadcasts, you know, we have our ongoing costs are about $1,500 a month to keep all this going. And so people that have been donating to us through the timeofthesixthsunmovie.com website, we're really grateful to you, because that does help us cover those costs. And if you can't do any of those things, you can share the live videos with others. So let me pull down that screen, and I'll pass over to you, Luna.
Thank you. Well, we haven't really introduced Jae and who and what he is. I guess you call yourself a sustainability strategist. Is that correct, Jae?
It's sort of this loose catch-all phrase that I've had to come up with, because sustainability, when it began as an industry, was very broad, and then it became very focused and specialist. And what I tried to do throughout the whole voyage of sustainability career movement was to keep broad. And not become too specialist, because it really seemed to me quite obvious how when you do reductionist approaches of turning things into little packages, that's where you keep having problems, that we need the big overview. And so that's why I use that big picture strategist term.
And you started, as Jae said for the slide, you started the Carbon Free Group in the UK, which is where we're based and where obviously I met you a decade ago.
Yes, it's been a while.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the Carbon Free Group?
Yeah, we've been around for 12 years, I believe now, maybe 13. Basically, it came out of, I was running the first clean technology support program in the UK for the European Union called Eco Enterprise. And I was working with about 400 British SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, that were working in the clean technology field. This was everything from architects to construction professionals to renewable specialists to innovators, and even some very, very big pie in the sky visionary thinkers. And I ran that project, and it came to an end, as many government funded projects do, and we didn't want to let all that hard work just sort of dissipate. So there was a group of us that we were working intensively together. We decided to form the Carbon Free Group together out of that. So it was many different enterprises coming together into one. And the Carbon Free Group is built around the principles of systems integration, about delivering the sustainable world and the built environment is the biggest focus. So it was all about, let's build things that show people how this can be done. And Nikki, you've been to the Pines Calyx, where you attended one of our Sustainability Explored events.
Amazing place.
Yeah, and the Pines Calyx is down in St. Margaret's Bay in Kent, a couple of miles from Dover. And we there built an example of ancient technology, Catalan timber vaulting from at least 1,500 years ago from the Spanish region of Catalonia, and integrated it with modern high-tech heat pumps, photovoltaic thermal management systems, advanced lighting, and all these other things. So it was an example of synergy. And what we were showing there is we could build something that was not only beautiful, and functional, but also cost effective. That facility actually costs less than a conventional concrete construction structure. And it was a way of demonstrating what was possible. And since then, we moved on to build the first passive house in the UK many, many moons ago, the first zero carbon building. And right now we're working on a project in Corby in the UK where we're building 47 carbon positive houses that are going to be on the market hopefully at the beginning of 2021. But they will be on the market for basically the same price as a conventional house. And this is showing people how the difference between talking the talk and walking the walk. It's not just about tell and tell, it's show and tell. And we've been focusing on how do you deliver sustainable, low carbon or carbon positive buildings for the same price as an average one, because the whole point here was understanding that this is not about building those beautiful green elite houses for the 15% of the population that really are interested in that. This is about building for the 60% of the population that isn't quite that interested yet. They'd like to do it, but they don't know how, and they don't really want to spend more. So it was aiming at broadening that marketplace. And we're now doing a lot of technical innovation in the blockchain sector, in new energy storage and energy production systems. So we're continuing that evolution.
Okay, well, we get to talk about some of those things. So chaos is an essential fact of renewal or aspect of renewal. And we've all been talking about this for years, bring on the change. And hey, guess what? It's here. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised. But what we're witnessing is the breakdown of our systems and things that are no longer sustainable and no longer fit for purpose. So from your perspective, Jae, what the heck is going on in the world from your perspective?
Well, it's very well put. The reality is that normal isn't viable for most of us. And if you look at it from a macro perspective, normal isn't viable for the planet. So we have been struggling as a civilization with technological innovation, with population growth, with abundance of wealth, and with an increased living standard for most of the world. What we have really been challenged with is the fact that, unfortunately, we're destroying the natural environments to such an extent that the planet can no longer support our ravenous appetite as a species. And we have yet to design our management systems in a way that takes that into account. Our economic system ignores most of the variables like climate change, their externalities. Our accounting systems don't hardly even touch sustainability in real, honest fashion. And our politicians are stuck in short-term perspectives for electioneering that mean that they can't, or they find it really difficult to think beyond 4 years if they're lucky. So the whole system's designed in a way which has become very navel-gazing. It's about immediacy, it's about now, it's about who can I help right immediately, who are my friends now. And that system means that we've been steadily walking towards some pretty big cliffs. And we have yet to design a feedback loop to protect us from ourselves. Basically, that's what it comes down to. Now, indigenous knowledge was based on the core elements of sustainability. In fact, all sustainability is indigenous wisdom applied in reality. You could not have been an indigenous community and been out of balance with your society, with your environment, because if you were, you died. Nature is the biggest, baddest SOB on the block. There ain't no HR department to come complain to. Nature obliterates things that do not comply with its balance principles, and we don't comply with them. So it's simply put an inevitability. Either we manage the situation or it manages us. And COVID is a beautiful example of that. And what is interesting here is there's that beautiful picture I saw on Facebook months ago, which was planet Earth saying to humanity, hey guys, this isn't really working. Do you think we could devise a way that makes this a little more balanced and a little safer for us all? And humanity says, yeah, we will. 2050, don't worry, we'll get there. And then nature says, okay, here's a virus, practice. And that's exactly what's happening here. We're all being woken up to the fact that the natural systems around us are actually in charge. This little virus showed us incredibly quickly how every one of our management systems, our most powerful economic systems, the biggest companies in the world, were suddenly thrown on their backside and trying to figure out how to deal with this variable, which, by the way, anybody who works in systems change or macro system management were fully aware this was coming. This pandemic was anticipated for 30 years. Yet most governments in the world were still caught on the back foot, even in March or April. And I mean, it's incredible how many government management systems highlighted, simply put, just how fragile they are. And this is vital. This is so vital. And what we're seeing in the United States with the rioting going on because of race and other issues, because this is about inequality, this is about race, this is also about the disparity between the ultra rich and the average person and the poor. Those are all applying pressure. And when you apply pressure to a system, it either finds a way out through little leaks or it explodes. It always is in the case. And if you look at all of human history, what we're seeing right now in the US, it's already experienced before. What we're seeing in the US has also been experienced in many countries around the world throughout human history. You know, this all comes out of one thing ultimately. And I think this is the core element. What is society? What is civilization? And what it is an agreed upon set of rules that we all consciously and subconsciously ascribe to. This is how we behave. This is what's okay. This is normal. And whatever that is, I do this, I don't do that. And the poorest in society and the marginalized in society have been seeing for many, many years that those rules do not apply equally. There's a rule for them and there's a rule for us. And eventually, when that happens for long enough, the people who are on the other side saying, you know what, these aren't fair, they have that pressure come out. They eventually burst. Just think of the French revolutions, off with their heads. Exactly the same thing. We've seen this pattern so many times. And what's funny is the elite, when that happens, try to convince the average, look, those people are breaking the rules. Isn't that bad? They're looting. That's horrible. I mean, we get their point that it's really bad to be racist, but come on, you're looting. That means everything you're saying is off the table. The reality here is they're just trying to convince the average people to keep playing by the rules that they don't ascribe to. And if the rules aren't applied equally, there is no choice but the system either stands up or it falls down. We are seeing right now that system being challenged. And it's been really interesting seeing how it's been coming out, because this analogy is for race, it's for sustainability, it's for climate change, it's for equality, it's for everything. It's just another version of it. And the powers that be in the United States will put their strength behind keeping control, because you know what happens? If they let those cracks broaden just a little bit, the light starts to shine through. And if that light shines through, the whole thing can fall apart in a moment's notice. And I'm excited.
It is, Jay.
It is. And I'm excited by that and I feel really sorry for the people who have to go through that horrible voyage, that really dangerous, scary chaos. But they are the ones who are potentially taking us to the next version of our society. We don't know yet, because what happens in these circumstances in history is they either change things or they get even harder and lock down into what they were. And everybody can see right now the rise of the extreme right. We have it in the UK, Russia, Hungary, India. We have it in the United States. We have it in Brazil. We have it in many countries around the world where the right is taking hold. And the reason why the right takes hold during times of crisis is because this is a military analogy, which I like to use. Roughly 7 in 10 humans are followers in society, naturally. About 1 in 10 are leaders, and about 1 in 10 are outlaws, and about 1 in 10 are self-destructives. Every one of us move through those 4 phases at different times in our life, but we have one that is their dominant. And what happens in the military is they take the 7 in 10 followers and make them 19 in 20 for a platoon. And they take the 1 in 10 leaders and make them a 1 in 20 leader in a platoon. They try to get the self-destructives out because they can be dangerous. They don't always succeed. And the outlaws, the outlaws are either kicked out or they're in charge, because you need outlaws to take anything to a new place. Leaders are really good at taking the rules and implementing them and maximizing them. Outlaws are essential to create new rules, new ways of being. Now, Trump is an outlaw. He's a bad example of an outlaw. But the outlaws are the only ones that give our society a chance in evolving. And this is something we in society are hilarious at, because our society actually is designed around the principles of enabling the leaders and creating followers. And our society hates outlaws. Every class you've ever been in high school or elementary school when you were a kid, that kid who was the outlaw was the one who got slammed on. And they were the class clown, or they were the ones that looked at things differently or didn't abide by the rules. The reality is Boris Johnson is an outlaw. Putin is an outlaw. Bolsonaro is an outlaw. Modi is an outlaw. They're just, unfortunately, neoliberal right-wing versions of outlaws. But so too was Isaac Newton. So too was Asimov. So too was Douglas Adams. So too were so many of our leaders, the people that we look at today and go, wow, they transitioned us. They changed us.
Yeah, biggest change of consciousness.
It is. And outlaws challenge society to try and move it somewhere different, somewhere new, wherever it happens to be. And then leaders are the ones who lock it into the new paradigm of being, and then the followers come in and do it. So what we're seeing right now in the United States is the followers are saying, I don't agree with this. It doesn't feel right to me. But in a right-wing ideology, in a dangerous times, we tend to, on average, the followers go towards ideologues, strongmen, who stand up and say, I'm going to solve all your problems with something simple, X, Y, or Z. And they're never right, and it never works, but we, as a society, seem to do it over and over again. I know at least 100 examples throughout human history of exactly the same thing. World gets difficult, people choose an ultra right-wing leader. Yeah. It happens over and over again. And it's scary because we don't seem to learn from this. Yeah. Here we go again.
We're finding ourselves, you're absolutely right, and we find ourselves very clearly at a precipice where the followers are saying, no. And we find ourselves in the middle of the year 2020, really, really powerful year for change. And big time. So you were saying to me earlier, it's like the roll of a dice for civilization. So how can we want to make changes. Everyone wants change and to live in a fairer, more different society. But I don't think anyone really knows how, because we do marches and stuff, and or Extinction Rebellion is a perfect example. They're raising massive consciousness and bringing awareness to the masses, but it seems like it falls on deaf ears for the leadership. It
always will, because the leadership's job is to maintain. So that's all there's there to do. You think of this, the bureaucracy. Think of civil service. Civil service in almost every country in the world is about maintaining. It's about process, not outcome. And anybody who's ever written a grant application will see exactly how the end outcome is 10%. 90% is dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So what we have done is create management systems that are highly resistant to change.
So how do we move out of
variations? That? Well, there are a couple of ways. One is the age-old democracy. You can actually vote for people to come in that have different ideas. It's a great idea. But having been a presiding officer in the UK, running elections when I used to work in local government, and yes, I worked in local government, which is utterly shocking. The only way I got things done was by ignoring the rules and walking around them. And that's how I got a little local authority in Kent called Maidstone to win a European Sustainable Procurement Award, because I never asked permission. I walked through all the pieces and set it up and then told the councillors afterwards, this is why you're getting an award.
You're such an outlaw.
Well, I am, and I don't have a choice. Believe me, I've tried to not be an outlaw my whole life because it's not fun. It's actually quite a painful process, because if you live ahead or in different places from the rest of the world, you don't quite fit in. And our civilization beats you down intentionally because you don't quite fit in. Now, if I happened to have been female, it would have even been harder. If I happened to have been black, whoa, even harder. If I happen to be of different sexual orientation, even harder. Like, you know, we could just pile the stuff on.
So where are the cracks? How do we push through?
The cracks are everywhere. And, you know, as Leonard Cohen said, that's how the light gets in. They're everywhere. And this system that we believe in, this business world, this economic system, we believe in accounting, but we believe in bureaucracy. As Tom Robbins said, you better keep believing in magic, because if you don't, you might start believing in bureaucracy and administration. We have to get that magic back. And now is one of those poignant moments where shit is hitting the fan everywhere. This is when that has the greatest chance. So, you know, I'm living in Canada, one of the safest, most moderate countries in the first world. I happen to be very privileged by being, luckily, in the right racial group that's in charge, in the right sex that's in charge. I've got all the great things lining up. And what I look at my country is a country that's totally not designed for the future. It's designed for the past. Our leadership's entirely focused on towing the middle line on every issue. And you cannot leap a chasm with little steps. You have to take a leap. And we're not prepared for it because as a nation, we're so heavily locked into fossil fuels that we won't. It's all, yeah, we'll transition off of fossil fuels one day. That's all you can do in a moderate sort of generic approach to life. Us standing next to the United States, which is just incredible right now. I'm watching, we are collectively watching the end of an empire, which is really interesting. It's painful. It's scary. I mean, I don't know where this is going to go, but what I can say is for 30 years I've been predicting what was happening in the United States from happening. I am not in any way surprised. I'm not surprised that their healthcare system has fallen to pieces with COVID because it's private. Because 30 million people lost their jobs 2 months ago in the US and lost their health insurance. No other country in the world had that happen.
Yeah.
You either had health insurance or you didn't, but the US went from this quick transition.
Yeah.
The US handed out a small amount of COVID money to people, which was nowhere enough to even pay your rent for 1 month. But they handed out baskets of money to big corporates. So they've taken that age-old approach. Let's help the bigs get bigger and let the small. So it's really interesting just seeing the cracks are everywhere. The renaming the road in front of the White House, Black Lives Matter Boulevard, was the most hilarious outlaw thing. I love that. They took the street signs down. They manufactured professional street signs, threw them all up in the same hour, and the whole road was renamed. And Trump has said to the mayor of Washington, D.C., you better change that. And she's like, yeah, okay, I'll get around to it one day, eventually. This is interesting. We're having this play back and forth. The more pressure that Trump throws in this, the more pressure the United States government does, the more aggressive they get with the police, the quicker their system is going to collapse. It's just that simple.
Yeah. What are you seeing, Taya? Because I'm seeing that we are this body. We've got a lot of leaders amongst us, a lot of very super bright people with great integrity, but it's like no one really knows where to push. What are you seeing, Taya?
I'm seeing the same thing. Yeah. You're seeing this all playing out. I mean, I really try hard not. And I know this sounds a bit burying my head in the sand, but I try hard not to watch the news. We don't even have a TV. Just because I don't want to be bombarded with this negativity. And what I do tend to read, I read about on social media because I feel if there's big things going on, people will be posting about them. So I'm aware of all these different things, but I don't think anybody's got a clue how this is going to play out because it's just happening so quick. The way that this pandemic hit the world, and then how fast everything got shut down, and now all this data that's coming out to go, sorry, we were wrong. CDC, sorry, we made a mistake. The actual chance of infection is 0.002%, and but then I see Facebook posts of friends who have got friends who have passed away from this disease. And it's like, what do you believe? Should I really never touch another surface again? Should I go out wearing gloves? Should I wear a mask? Is a mask like wearing a tennis net to try and catch a mosquito? Who knows? Because we're getting such contradictory evidence. And I don't trust the people that are supposed to be the ones giving us the answers. And I think the moment you've lost that trust, that's where all of this debate comes up because people don't know what to believe.
And that's the social contract being ripped apart because we've lost faith in the established rules and systems around us that are supposed to protect us from ourselves. And that's great. I mean, it's horrible, but it's great. This is the biggest stirring we can imagine. If you think, when was the last, even a war doesn't affect the economy like COVID has. What else has been hilarious, and I love this as a student of economics, is when everybody around the entire planet is basically making up fake money. And they don't even print money anymore. They just go in a spreadsheet and throw a couple of decimal places on it. It's all fake. All money is fake now. None of it has any reality.
Fake news, Trump.
Well, then what happens there that's hilarious is if everybody collectively is making up fake money everywhere to the biggest amount we've ever made it up, then we can't devaluate our currencies because we're all in the same bucket, which means that this is the truth coming out that money is fake. It's all fake. So if we were honest, the countries like the UK and the US and Canada and Australia throw in their debt loads up the greatest amount they've ever been in history would downgrade our credit rating so much the cost of borrowing would skyrocket. The only option for us would be to shut down services everywhere or to increase taxes through the roof. But no government will do that, because if they do, they're out of power. So guess what? They can't be honest about this fake game. So we all have to collectively just go, la, 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 let's pretend it isn't real. It's insane. It's all insane.
There's a big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
But I love it, because neoliberal capitalism, I don't think, can survive what's happening. Because when we are all socialists now. The most right-wing countries in the world are suddenly socialist because we're giving money to people for free. That's anti-conservative belief. But they're all doing it. The most conservative countries are doing it. So what does this say to us? It says that strong men are the most dangerous thing to have in power during times of crisis, which we've all known before. Whoever's learned from history, well, here we are again. We've also learned that in the end of the day, it is the cleaners and the shop workers and the IT support person and the nurses who are the ones who are keeping our society going, not the billionaires and the CEOs.
Yeah.
Once again, we're relearning that. And what is hilarious here is we should be approaching this from the angle of going, well, how about like New Zealand and Finland? Guaranteed basic income assessments. Spain just launched the first guaranteed basic income in Europe, where they're now guaranteeing about 500 euros per month per adult as a minimum money you can ever make for anything. That's a radical shift. Finland is transitioning to a 4-day work week. New Zealand is transitioning to a 4-day work week. Why? Because they're saying we are affluent, successful, wealthy nations. Why are we working as hard as we used to? We should be buying freedom, because our society will prosper more. We'll be happier. We'll be more fulfilled. This will help our public healthcare systems drop their costs because people aren't depressed and running all the time. I mean, this is not complicated. But, I mean, I have friends in the United States who get 2 weeks of holiday a year, and they get in deep social trouble if they take their 2 weeks of holiday because it's frowned upon in the society. Just imagine how much pressure that builds up over your life of being exhausted. And that's not a civilized way of dealing with the world. But maybe we have some choices.
Maybe it's some of these countries leading by example and doing that, dropping to a 4-day week and leading the world by example, that this is the way it can be and people are happy, and maybe that is the way to go.
It may be, because New Zealand and Finland are approaching it from a pragmatic point of view. You still work the same number of hours you did in your old job. You just do it in 4 days instead of 5. And you know what? Loads of evidence showing your productivity is higher that way. You get more done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
What about school? My kids my daughter's out of school because COVID shut her school down. Right now we're talking about September, and she's like, I don't want to wake up at 6 in the morning and spend an hour and a half getting ready to go to school, to sit in class all day long, to get home at 4:30. I'd rather just do this from home, and I'd rather wake up at 9 or 10 and do my schoolwork and get it done. People are now starting to go, I don't have to do what I used to do. I don't have to go in the office. I don't need to commute downtown to sit somewhere. That is part of this big transition that's starting, that's going to come out of this, but not for everybody, because those are only those of us that have the capacity to work remotely.
Yeah, exactly.
Real low-end workers don't. If you're a laborer, if you're a server, if you're a carer, you can't do that. So we have this inequality in the ability to adjust, right? And that's challenging, but we have choices.
Yeah.
So, we want to encourage our governments to think longer term for eons. It's the 4 years that they're in, and that's their focus, no further. How can we encourage our governments to have the doing things on behalf of the future generations when they're making decisions? Is that something you see at all in government leadership?
We do in some. I mean, the UK was the first country in the world to have a legislated carbon reduction target that was out of the hand of the individual party that was in power. And that was a very powerful tool. What's unfortunately happening is we've had successive current governments say, we'll just kick this in the long grass and make it harder and have the targets. Yeah, they're still there, but someone else is going to have to do way more after us. So there's a flaw there, but the core idea is pure. The other one is it only takes 50 letters to an MP to make most MPs react to something. if you get 1,000 physical letters on their desk, MPs usually react to it quite radically because they get scared. And remember, the systems are designed for immediacy of feedback loops. So people need to be much better at being actively engaged with the people who represent them. And it doesn't mean always being negative. It just means saying, how about this? How about that? I'd really like it if you did this. I didn't like that you did that. Those are the ways that change MPs' decisions. Government officers react because of those sort of things. And I mean, as being the presiding officer in the UK, what was funny watching elections in Kent was just how high a percentage of old age pensioners showed up and voted, and just how tiny a percentage young people voted. So in the United Kingdom, decisions are made by the volume of people who vote. And if only 20% of under 30-year-olds bother to vote and 80% of over 60-year-olds get to vote, guess what? All decisions are made by one group.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. So this is why people don't vote, because they feel disenfranchised. They feel pointless. In my entire life, I voted for one minister in my entire life that actually got in. I never, ever voted for the party that got in.
Yeah.
So I still showed up and voted. But we have within democracy the capacity to alter things radically. This problem ultimately behind all this is the systems are designed for process. We need to redesign all of our management systems for outcomes. It doesn't matter how you get there. It matters where you go. And that is the antithesis of how we manage our world today. We manage our world today by prescription. Now, think about accounting. Really great practice that's phenomenally valuable at telling you what just happened in a company. Is it very good at predicting what's going to happen in 3 or 5 years? Is it very good at predicting what's going to happen with climate change? It's useless. In fact, it's a tool that is a false flag. It identifies problems that are microscopic compared to the real problems because it doesn't have the capacity to take into account the externalities. And the ICAEW in the UK is trying to integrate natural capital into what they're thinking. They're trying to integrate triple bottom line accounting. But the struggle they're having is the businesses aren't asking for their accountants to do that. So how do they pivot the accounting profession if the customers aren't requesting that new way of being? It's hard. And I think that's the challenge here, is the government needs to lead. And it needs to lead from a place of serving the people that it represents in the long term. And that's very hard to do with our government systems. A friend of mine who's a political scientist had this brilliant idea. He said, how we solve party politics in Western democracies is jury duty. That means every election, 1 out of every 3 people is randomly assessed to become an MP. 1 out of every 3rd MP is just random. It's a housewife, it's a professor, it's a teacher, whoever in that community. And then they get thrown in the pot as a minister of parliament for 4 years. And what happens is if they want to stay in power, they got to get elected in the next time. But what that would do is stir things up. There would always be this 1/3 variable in every pool of MPs, which was unknown, which was unaffiliated, which had to figure its way out. And there, the chances of us actually having people who are doing their job would greatly improve. Because they would be, and it's a really interesting, simple idea, because he was saying this is down to the systems we've already got. And because right now we have far too many people who run for government who are part of an established system. We need more normal people in the room to make these decisions.
I think you said the word. I think it's freshness, bringing in that fresh passion and You got any questions, Taya, you want to ask?
This is absolutely fascinating. I always know when I'm having fascinating because I'm writing notes.
So, if we're talking about government leaders, what should our leaders be looking at right now as a top priority, Jae?
Well, it depends where. In the US, the top priority needs to be reacting to and listening to what's going on around them and realizing that they have 2 choices to make: transition or collapse. It's that simple. If it's in the UK, it's very complex in the UK with Brexit, because there is this process occurring which is behind the scenes, which is not really being properly addressed, which is going to cause immense amounts of challenges for the United Kingdom for many years to come. And I feel for the UK. Having becoming British myself after living there for so many years and nationalizing, I really feel for it, because this is this weirdest stormy seas you can ever imagine. And now COVID's tossed in with Brexit, and you've got the absence of leaders, a real absence of individuals who are standing for anything other than their own desires and goals. I don't really know where the UK can go from this. I think collapse is the only option. I hate to say it, but I just do. I don't see the management systems being capable of dealing with this many variables. I don't have faith in them.
Is that why
having
you
been
left, Jay? In
Yeah,
all
it
honesty,
is.
is that why you left?
I saw Brexit coming,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to watch all that I built have to go through that. Even though I still own a company in the UK, even though I still work in the UK, it's really difficult. If you're looking at other countries around the world, they each have their own intonation on this, but how do they deal with the transformational process of going from a power base, whatever it is, could be mining, could be fossil fuels, could be agriculture, could be anything. How do they go from that to what's coming next in the best way possible? And what this all comes down to is decision-making frameworks that are transparent so that people can see how people go through their decisions. And what we don't have is evidence-based decision-making anywhere. I mean, it was really funny. AECOM, one of the biggest construction companies in the world, just announced the other month that they are going to have science-based targets for the strategic management of their company. So that means they're actually taking part of their decisions outside of their leaders and handing it to a science-based system, which will then inform the leaders. That's an example of the beginning of some of this sort of thinking.
Yeah.
Because we are far too locked into the cult of personality. Still, most places in the world, it's not what you know, it's who you know that makes all the difference in the world. That makes us very primitive. That makes us actually more primitive than primitive people ever were, because they had decision-making systems which supported their groups. We are actually less evolved than many Stone Age groups of people would have been when it comes to feedback loops, because they could react to their threats. They could go, we don't have any food here anymore, we got to move on, and they would collectively get on with it. We today will just keep ignoring those variables because they don't fit with our viewpoints until we're in deep trouble.
Oh, yeah, we keep arguing about it.
We do. I mean, climate change is a good example. There's still, not in the UK, not in most first world countries, but in the US, there's still a conceded, solid, central debate whether science exists or not, whether the evidence is true or not. That is a weird place to be in 2020 when we've never had more access to information. So, but it is where they are. Australia is the same. Australia is really in the dark ages when it comes to climate change awareness, whereas New Zealand, really forward thinking. So, there's some really interesting examples. What I would say is the best examples of leaderships in this time of crisis have been almost universally female-led. These are Denmark, Finland, New Zealand. You have some examples of Taiwan, where you have female leaders, Germany, Angela Merkel, stepping up and saying, you know what, I can see beyond my 2 feet. I can see the world around me. And I'm not saying females are the be-all and end-all for all this. It's just the decision-making frameworks that we created amongst ultra-elite white men suck. They fail us every time.
Yeah,
I'm just fed up with it.
We had White Eagles saying that, telling us about an old prophecy, a Native American prophecy that said there will come a time when all tribes will be led by women. Mm-hmm. Even our lovely Desmond Tutu shared a secret with us that he had a longing for women to lead us because men had fucked up, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so apparent, the writing's on the wall, but it's how do we make that action, that shift? Because I'm still not seeing it. No, I don't think people in this country are seeing it. I think we're so.
Jay, we want to talk about because I titled this "Sustainability Through Innovation," and it just seems to me that everything is accelerating so fast. It's expanding so fast. And so what innovations, what technologies do you see coming in the next, say, 4 to 5 to 10 years time that are going to make a difference? I mean, we know of the work of Tesla, and how his work was quashed, and the free energy from the quantum vacuum. We talk about it in our Ancient and Future Technologies episode of the docuseries. But why are these free energies? If this is possible, and speaking to Mark Cuthbert, he told us all about this free energy machine, that continues to draw out of the quantum vacuum. Why are these things not being out there that could reduce our reliance on fossil fuels?
Well, there are texts all over the place that can, even something as simple as solar and wind. We've never had it cheaper. It is now the cheapest form of energy generation in almost the entire planet. Almost every country in the world is wind. And that is continuing to drop. Solar has crashed through the floor. So it's now, you cannot generate energy more cheaply than with renewables already. And the issue there is storage, because you need to be able to balance energy when you produce it and when you need it. But that's actually coming together really quickly. Like, just to put it in perspectives, solar panels have dropped in cost over the last 10 years by 78%, and the next 5 years they're expected to drop by another 45%. Wind has dropped by something similar, even more. Batteries have dropped by 90% in the last 10 years. Like, this is a revolution in tech. And it isn't down to like the lithium-ion battery in a Tesla car. That's high density energy for a vehicle. We don't need that in communities. We need large density. We can go with massive batteries, shipping container sized batteries that cost a fraction as much. So there's all these interesting technological solutions. And this is what I've spent much of the last 10 years working in, is clean tech innovation. And everything comes down to a mix of payback period. How much are you going to make? And if it's new and innovative, that's scary. So therefore, the cost of borrowing capital is higher. But also, the incumbent system, wherever you happen to be, however it's done, say energy, is run by established, powerful organizations. They don't want something showing up which makes the things they invested in last year or 5 or 10 years ago look bad. So there's an inherent desire to moderate and limit. Like, the UK banned onshore wind up until this week when they reversed that ban. For 7 years, you weren't allowed to build wind turbines on the ground in the UK, the cheapest form of energy generation in the world, because a bunch of people in positions of power said, I don't like how it looks. They don't seem to have a problem with a giant coal facility or a natural gas burner, but that's just a psychological thing there. But that's shifting because of economics, and it's pure money saying, well, you can't ban this thing which is way cheaper than this bad thing that you're already spending money on. So
can people collectively in the public get together and start to back innovative perpetual batteries and to help them bring it to market as a collective against the companies?
There's a lot of ways of doing that. You have crowdsourced funding through things like Crowdcube and many, many other platforms. You have venture capital investment firms that focus exclusively on clean tech innovation. There's a whole bunch of ways of doing this. Abundance Generation in the UK is a really great organization for taking pension fund money, and it only invests in things that actually help the world instead of hurt the world, while at the same time making money. There are community-owned. Abundance Generation is brilliant. There are community-owned wind farms. There are community-owned solar projects. They're all over the place. So it's really, there's a lot of ways to do this. It depends where you are in the world. Some places in the world it makes more financial sense than others because of various issues: the price of electricity, the cost of plugging into the grid. Where I live in British Columbia, it's impossible to generate renewable energy because the grid is managed by one company, which won't allow you to. So the only thing you can do is do your own thing behind the fence and not touch the grid, which
isn't that frustrating? Yeah, it's limiting.
In a green place like British Columbia, the fact that it's easier to build wind farms in Syria than it is BC, yeah, that's crazy. But this is because of an incumbent company, which is a crown corporation owned by the government, which they don't want to threaten. So they just sort of hold it back. And what people need to understand is some of this technology is getting so cheap, like solar, that it's going to cover everything. It's going to be like water. It's going to cover all objects. You're going to have it over your garden shed. You're going to have it on your roof. You're going to have it in your windows. You're going to have it on your roof of your car. Because you know why? It's the same price as the normal roofing material. It's the same price as the normal car material. It's the same price as whatever. So this is what's coming. It's just a matter of time. And as batteries get cheaper, we tick all those boxes. One of the technologies I'm working with right now, which I can't talk too much about it because we're pre-commercial, but this is a technology that's designed to transmit electricity without wires. And it was originally designed to recharge pacemakers inside the human body because we have to do surgery to do that. And it's an expensive, risky situation because you have infection and complications. And this technology was designed, well, how about we recharge the battery inside the pacemaker, inside the body? But the problem is you can't send energy into a body, human or organic cells, without damaging them. So they developed a technology that moved through the different hertz frequencies, never stayed anywhere long enough to actually cause cells to heat up. really interesting. And then they went, oh, well, we can do pacemakers, but what else could we do? So we're just at the beginning of looking at solar panels with no wires, panels that each individual cell makes power and generates and transmits that power to the receiver without having to be plugged in. So this is gigantic technological innovation. We could drop the price of solar by 70% with this.
And of course, we do know how to put energy into bodies. Of course we do. It's an age-old thing. We
do. And what's interesting here is some of our technological innovation is getting to a place where we can do things that were impossible even a couple of years ago, or were cost effectively wiped out. You couldn't do this because it wasn't worth it. But that transition's happening everywhere. One of the companies that Carbon Free Group works with and partially owns is called Power Transition. This is a technology that uses blockchain to manage electricity generation inside of an individual house. So you could say your own solar panel, you measure every watt of electricity it generates, exactly what it transmitted through and who used it on the other end. We now have a technology that enables you as a landowner or a resident in East Sussex to say, I would like to buy my electricity from only within the next 5 miles of me. Is it possible? I'd like it to be 100% renewable. And this system says yes or no. You can get 30% of it from this. I'd only want to buy my electricity from not-for-profit charities. Okay, go for it. I only want to buy my electricity from community-owned cooperatives. Okay, there you go. So you now have the ability to do this at a cost which is so low, it's irrelevant. You don't even notice that you have this additional price. But it means we can now manage things in a way that is unheard of even a year ago. Yeah, so I find this really, we have never been in a place closer to being able to solve all of our technical problems. It comes down to human will, and it comes down to us changing the systems that help the incumbent industries and enable them to stay in positions of power. It really, that's what it is. And Tesla dealt with this. He got nailed by the fact that when he created alternating current, it was a threat to direct current way back in the early 1900s, and that's what eventually destroyed him, because the people in the direct current world were powerful and wealthy. He wasn't. The Betamax versus the VHS.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Tesla. So, I mean, ultimately, I was going to ask you if we're ever going to see something like free energy. I mean, we've all been privy to various theories that have been going around that this technology was hijacked and then used by the precious few, or not so precious. So if that really does hit the light of day, is it possible that we'll be able to use that energy technology so the world gets free electricity?
It technically may be possible, but in our current management systems, it'll be unviable because the incumbents will buy it and kill it or suppress it. The death of the electric car, GM's beautiful electric car from long ago, they shut it down because it was a direct threat to their business model. People who are in positions of leadership of power in industries stay in those positions. They use their power to buy up the threats or to suppress them or to control the politicians to make their process of getting in the system impossible or incredibly difficult. It's boring, but that's what it comes down to. Yes, you might invent this new technology like you're saying, but if you can't plug it into the grid because the grid regulator won't let you, you have no business case. You have no way of rolling out. And there are examples like that everywhere. In the food world, I mean, right now in the UK, they're now looking at lowering the food standards because of US imports of food that are not allowed in the EU. That's how it works. The incumbents get in positions of power. Monsanto, a wonderful example with Roundup, putting out neonicotinoids and horrible chemicals that cause vast amounts of biological damage, but they managed to manipulate the systems to keep them alive. I mean, it's crazy because any logical, rational decision-making system would say, you are poisoning us. This is not good. No, but they're not that simple. You know, I hate to say it, but every system is corrupted by the incumbent power bodies. I'm
feeling really depressed. So how
hopefully not, because we can change this by
no, but how do we stop? How do we? It's really the power of the people. That's all I can see. It's all that flashes up for me is actually there's many of us and few of them. And we in what we invest in and pay attention to and focus to and buy. So, for example, I was watching an interview last night with the Amazonian beautiful indigenous lady, Diara. and she was saying that in the Amazon, they have no sustainability anymore. And the monocrops, being forced into producing monocrops like corn, soya, palm oil, is ruining them. Where do they go with biodiversity? Because that's what they need. They're desperate.
They are, and Brazil is unfortunately an example of a failing state. They've elected in a leader who rips up the rules when he doesn't like them, and he's very transparent about it, and he has enough support to keep him in power. That's a really difficult situation. And I mean, indigenous communities around the world have been dealing with this since colonization. They have all been oppressed. They have all been kicked off their land. They have all been limited. And this is an interesting, sad fact. But I mean, here in Canada, we've worked a lot to try and change the relationship with the First Nations. But when push comes to shove, Canada breaks its own rules often when it doesn't really work with what it wants. So it'll create a rule set and then go, yeah, but in this case, we'll sort of change the rule. Even countries that are advanced are doing that. So I'd say New Zealand is probably the best example of a country that's managed to find a level of balance with its indigenous people, the Maori, that is far more cohesive. Every single New Zealand primary school student learns Maori. Every one of them. Doesn't matter where you're from. They have changed things radically. And that's just really interesting because that indigenous wisdom has a place there. For instance, the donut economy model that was created in the University of Oxford, which the city of Amsterdam is now starting to roll out, which is a circular economy decision-making system. The Maori in New Zealand have created a Maori version of the donut economy, and they've shared it with the donut economy woman. I can't remember her name. And she's been like, I love this. Let's integrate a bunch of these indigenous ideas into the core model. That's a feedback loop, which is beautiful.
Fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can share some images which you may want to put up on this, if you will. They're a graphic image of what the Maori donut economy model looks like. It's really, we've got the answers. What I want to say right now is we have the technologies, we have the solutions, we know how to fix almost every problem in the world. So there we are. The next piece is the human issue. That's the piece we got to deal with. And most of it comes down to ego. There was this beautiful line, which was a man asked Buddha, I want happiness. How can I get there? And Buddha says, well, okay, first thing you need to get rid of the I, because that's the ego, and that always gets in the way. Want is about desire. Desire always leads to suffering. Get rid of that. There you go. You got happiness. It's funny. Yeah, it's so simple. But the funny thing is, the ego is probably one of our biggest challenges as a civilization and as a species, because our egos push us into a place where we think our opinions are the most important. And Socrates said beautifully that the epitome of wisdom is the ability to take a concept into your mind that is totally opposition to what you think and feel, look at it, explore it, entertain it, and put it back down again without any harm. Now, do you see that happening right now with our leaders?
Not a lot.
Whatever they are, left, right, center, who cares? We all need to be very, very liberal with the advice we listen to and very conservative with the advice we take. Doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. Yeah. So sustainability is making it easier to do good than it is to do bad. Right now, it's much easier to do bad. We have to work hard to do good.
One of our viewers, Pamela Collard, hi Pamela, she says that these people in power can only stay in power if we, the public, continue to accept them, vote for them, buy their products. We can change this. Thank you for your absolute positive attitude, Pamela, and it's true. The power is in our hands, and we think it's maybe through revolution or taking to the streets, but it's not. It's where we put our money. It's all about money.
Absolutely. There was a woman in New York. I saw a video of her, a black woman who was on the street yelling at a bunch of looters. And she was yelling at the looters saying, you just burnt the bus stop. You've just destroyed a little recycling depot center that has a couple of USB chargers for phones with a little solar panel. And she's like, there's 3 homeless people who live in this neighborhood, and that's the only place they can go to charge their phones. And we use this bus stop to get to work. And what are you doing? Because this isn't helping your message. And she said, you all better damn well be registered to vote, because that is where you should be applying your protests. If you don't want to get out on the street and do something positive, then go vote these people out. And you're right, voting is core. The other one is procurement, what you buy. The most powerful message you send to the world around you is deciding how you spend your money, deciding where you put your savings, where you put your pension, because most people's pension are facilitating the destruction of our world. Most people's money is ironically counterintuitive to what their own desires are. And I mean, it's ironic, in Ontario, the biggest care home facility, which has been lambasted by the government for the highest amount of deaths for old age people because of how bad the care was, its primary shareholder is the Ontario government. It didn't even know it had invested in them, and yet it was fining the company it was the primary shareholder in because it hadn't set up management systems to make it abide by the rules.
What a craziness. What a craziness.
But that happens everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere in the world you see that.
Yeah.
So procurement is core.
It is, and it's the compounded effect of this, because, you know, a lot of people will go, well, it makes no difference if I don't buy it from that person. But, you know, when the CEO of Nestle came out all those years ago and said that that water is not a human right, and that they're buying up these lakes and then they're bottling that water up and then they're selling it for a profit, and then also what they were doing with the baby formula in Africa and all of these things, I made a decision probably 6 or 7 years ago now never to buy another Nestle product, and I haven't. And you know, and I'm just one person, but I know lots and lots of people I've spoken to over the time go, I didn't know they were doing that. I didn't know they were doing that. And then they stop buying those products. And as you're saying, you know, with Monsanto, you know, it's you know, stop selling this Roundup, you know, weed killer. They're putting, you know, people think, oh, I've got weeds in my front garden, and go spray Roundup all over it. Well, what you don't understand is that that glyphosate is then going into the water, it's then going down to the drains, it's ending up in the reservoirs, in the rivers, it's then affecting our fish. And it's people are so short-sighted and don't see the longer-term
logic
compounding of their actions. But compounding can work both ways. It can work in a beautiful way, like deciding we're not going to buy from this company anymore en masse, and it will hurt their bottom line. But it can also work the other way with things like Roundup, and you know, people think, oh, it's only my garden, it doesn't matter. But if you're doing it and somebody else doing it, it's all going into our water supply. It's incredible how it can switch between the two sides of compounding, whether it works for the benefit or whether it works for the negative.
So I think back in 2013, fair trade banana sales in the UK exceeded non-fair trade bananas for the first time. Suddenly, there were more fair trade than there were non-fair trade. And like that was an example of consumer purchasing just gradually shifted this thing up. And that made a big difference to a lot of banana farmers in the developing world. And so you're right. And when Sainsbury's decided as the biggest fair trade seller to pull out of fair trade a couple of years ago, because they had a new chief executive who was like, this is costing too much. We'd rather set up our own standard, which is lower, which costs us less. There was this massive backlash. And there was a massive exodus of consumers. That caused him to reverse that decision. Now, what's interesting here is we can all do this in every different regard. And today we've never had access to more information to actually start sharing and knowing. And this is something that I've been working on the side, is a rating system for goods and products that actually incorporates its environmental, its economic, and its social impacts. And it has a traffic light system, so you can see what is green, amber, red. And you can get a quick view on it. And if you want, you can go into more detail. Think of Ethical Consumer Magazine. Brilliant magazine out of the UK. One of the best examples. These guys just look at the sustainability, the economic, and the societal impact of every product. They're a godsend, and it's a magazine I really recommend people check out.
Ethical Consumer Magazine.
Yeah, it is incredible. It's a British institution from Manchester, which is of course where co-ops were founded. So the UK gave birth to co-ops. The UK gave birth to the first national health system. The UK gave birth to the first legal charities in the world. The UK has been a foundation of so much of this social thinking for so long. A lot of people don't realize it. And remember, the UK has also showed us that the poorest 25% in society contribute twice as much as a percent of their money than the richest 25% to charities. So the UK is a perfect example of the poorest people doing twice as much than the richest. That's interesting, you know, and that to me says a lot. It says there's this undercurrent of charity shops. There's an undercurrent of reuse, and that's from the Victory Garden stuff. This goes way back to World War II, where the communities got together to support each other. That's why the NHS was formed. The National Health Service came out of the World War II because a conservative government said, we have to do this. I mean, Abraham Lincoln started a civil war to stop slavery. He was a Republican. People forget this.
Yeah.
The heart of conservative ideology is to conserve, to protect. True conservatives would never obliterate the world. They would protect it. The first national park system developed in the entire world was by a Republican in the United States. So I find it really interesting when you tell people who are conservative.
Yeah. And you've frozen. Have you frozen, Theo?
No, I'm still here, but Jay has definitely frozen mid-shuffle in his chair.
What a conservative.
No,
Are
he's
you
back.
back? Hang on a minute. Are you back? Yeah. I was just about to ask him about regenerative agriculture.
There's, I didn't.
Are you there, Jay?
Maybe.
Well, whilst we're waiting for him to come back, wouldn't it be a great idea if we could have a sort of list that we can pledge to, add names to, that really do harm to the planet, and we all pledge not to buy things from them? I, by the way, did have Theo come to my house some months ago and find an old box of cereal, which was Nestle's, and he humiliated me to get rid of it very quick. But, I won't ever forget that now. So, yeah, maybe we try this.
Humiliated is a strong word, Luna. I just said, I can't believe you've got Nestle in your house. Wow, this is fantastic. And I love to hear about these, a lot of us just trundle along doing our bit. Everybody's doing their bit. But, powerhouses like Jay, setting up the carbon-free group, and really making a difference. And, when he talks in episode 2 of the docuseries about sustainable futures, he just gives it, doesn't he? He just tells you it as it is. There's no waffle. There's no, wouldn't this be nice? It's like, this needs to happen. Yeah,
well, he was still, when I interviewed him before, I don't think it was, maybe it was a bit of it put into the docuseries, but it was about the food shortages and water shortages. And we need to be thinking about those things and getting our little bits of garden and, where we can grow our own veg out on our rooftops and stuff. It's important.
I know so many people have started to do that since this lockdown, that have actually got out into their garden and thought, you know what, let's plant some things and do it. It's part of the fun thing with kids, to see my little boys got given some sunflower seeds by a neighbor. And, just to watch the delight as they're seeing these sunflowers grow in these little pots. And it's just, it's simple things, seeing the spinach growing, seeing the rocket growing, seeing these things that we then bring to the table and eat instead of it coming from we're very lucky, the local organic food shop or something. But it's amazing to see all these changes taking place. And
it's true. So I was going to ask Jay, I will ask him when he comes back, but about regenerative agriculture, because I saw online these hobbit houses that can be used as houses, but also they can be used for agriculture, a bit like a polytunnel. But they're these shells that slot and fit together. And, maybe that is the way forward. Jay was certainly saying earlier when I spoke to him that there's a name for it. It's called internal farming. And we are going to be having to look to do that more and more in the future to protect our crops. And you can grow an incredible amount of leaves inside, very healthily, organic salads and kale and cabbages and things, I guess, just greenery.
And soil, yeah. And this is what Monique's in London saying here. Grow food in public spaces. I mean, there's that sort of thing's happening, isn't there? But then there's also these ridiculous things you read about people getting told off for harvesting rainwater. And I read about that poor guy in the United States was taking rainwater off the roof to water his garden and got, the authorities said you're not allowed to do that.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
At what level does that ever come in? At what level does that come in?
So I can keep pushing Jae, because I want to. We know what the problems are, and it's fantastic to hear it from his expertise and perspective. But it's this feeling of apathy, not apathy. I think we've got apathy from the whole long period of Brexit and stuff, but also it's like that inability to. We don't know how to move forward. We have this desire to create, and please speak up, or our viewers, if you're feeling the same thing, but we want to create and jump into this new world. But the truth is, and Jae confirmed that this morning, is that the systems just aren't there. The systems aren't there. They're not up and running, ready for us yet. So, people need to be maybe getting together and creating, really taking action and creating these new systems.
Yeah, well, Jenna's asking this. I'll bring this up. We're both going to disagree. She says, "Hiya, how do we get people to change their insecurities about change? As you said earlier, people flock towards the easiest routes, the easiest ways, the way that doesn't mean they have to change their daily lives. Many people I know agree about the need for change and a different way of being, but then won't or don't do anything about it because it's too much effort. So many posts on social media were of the same people saying how great the benefit of lockdown is having on the environment." I mean, that is one side of it. I can't read the rest of it, Jenna, because it disappeared down the down the feed. But yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? How do you get people to change their insecurity about change?
It's walking the talk. There's a lot of talk around, and I hear it all the time. But to actually physically do something. So maybe anyone write in and tell us what you're prepared to do. Even if it's creating a list and saying, these things are not good. I read it in this magazine, and do your research and start something that we can join, where we can start to not purchase those particular products. It's a great thing. Yeah, it's going to take a little bit of effort and a bit of balls, but we've got to start doing it for ourselves and taking responsibility. I don't think our leaders are going to do it for us, quite frankly.
No.
When years back, there was talk about possible food shortages, and we live in a village with which is sort of Rudolf Steiner based. There's 2 community farms based on the biodynamic farming system, and they actually got together and they talked and discussed, and I believe they changed, I certainly know Plorhatch did, changed their farming quota because what they had in mind was how they would, in the future, best serve the community food-wise. Yeah. That's amazing. That's innovative thinking.
Okay, Jay's back, Luna. I'm going to bring him back in.
Hello,
Jay. Welcome back.
I had to switch to my phone because my home internet crashed.
Okay, no worries. Maybe see, the moment you start talking about things that the big people don't want you to talk about, we keep having these technological issues.
So I was going to ask you about regenerative agriculture, these shell systems where you can create a fabulous, like a hobbit house almost, but for growing, for indoor farming. Is that the way of the future? Is that where we're moving, do you think, Jae? I mean, we've got all these heavy metals and toxins in the air. Is that how we're going?
Yeah, that's a good question. Regenerative soil-based agriculture obviously is the king of all when it comes to health and nutrition. The problem we've got is, as the world population continues to grow, our demands on food and land and water and resource are growing so much so that the Earth's ability to sustain us is quite challenged. So we are going to have to switch to a lot more professionalized, containerized, internalized management systems for food production. And you can do this sustainably. You can do this organically. There are a lot of examples of, for instance, shipping containers that have got all the lighting systems built in and the water recirculating and cleaning systems. And I'm actually working on a project right now on Bowen Island. Hopefully we'll do that, which will allow people to actually put a small 10 or 20-foot container on their land and start producing on-site food. And the reality is that if you want resilience and you want local food production and you want it year-round and you also want consistent employment, these systems are going to be an integral part of this because, for instance, many communities there's no longer an economic case for growing food in a small farm because you can't make as much money as it's going to cost to run it. So our food production is getting pushed further and further away. It's becoming more and more industrialized. And if you're actually a student of history, you'll learn that the Roman Empire made that mistake. One of the things that killed the Romans was they gradually, because they became wealthier and wealthier, shifted their food production further and further away from their cities. And at that time, at the height of the Roman Empire, the breadbasket was Libya and Egypt, and which ended up turning gradually into a desert. And their food production started to drop off over time because of variations in weather, which meant that their food had to come from further and further away, became more and more expensive. There were disruptions, which are one of the things that contributed to the collapse of the Roman Empire, is because there was nobody growing anything locally because the land was too valuable to grow on. You'd rather build a villa. And can any of us recognize that in any of our big cities? I mean, we're making the same mistake again. And what COVID's been useful for is highlighting the fragility of our food production systems. I mean, where I live on this little island with 3,500 people, we produce maybe 1% of our food. So guess what? If our little ferry got cut off, it's pretty easy to see what would happen. And most people don't care about that because they think, well, I'll just go to the grocery store. But once COVID struck, we got to see what that was all about.
Yeah.
And see limitations. And the price points are going to start going up for food, especially vegetables and meat, because of COVID, supply chain challenges. We, in the UK had to import a whole bunch of Eastern Europeans just to start planting out the fields because there weren't enough indigenous people who were willing to do the work. These are massive impacts on the resilience of a community. But if you have a containerized system, which sort of has a fairly regular harvesting scheme, just think of lettuce. Every week and a half, 2 weeks, you're getting another little crop of lettuce coming out of it. You can have the model needed to employ somebody. You know what your outputs are going to be. You get consistency. You can start to build that in. And one of the things we're looking at here on Bowen is lettuce, because it's the highest value product you can grow. You get the highest turnover. Yeah, you can make more money from green leafy veg than you can from anything else in the Western civilization. Not in the developing world. That's totally not the case. But in Western civilization, you grow arugula, boom, you're there you go. You're in the money. And so what we're looking at is doing that to support other vegetable growing, which is lower return on investment. So you have the aggregate output, which is we're looking at this from a whole system perspective instead of just profit, because then we're looking at community resilience. The other thing is recirculating aquaculture systems or RAS systems, which can recirculate 99% of the water inside of themselves and clean it and use it again. That is going to be the way of the future for fish production, simply put, because we're destroying our oceans. We are obliterating our ocean's ability to feed us, and there are collapses occurring in nature all around us. Humans have got to get a lot better at stop damaging nature, and one of the ways we're going to do that is through some of these ways. And just think how climate change is going to affect rainfall. It's going to affect wind. It's going to affect flooding. It's going to affect sunlight in many regions. It's going to become harder and harder and harder to produce food in a reliable way. We have no choice.
What did you think about the Extinction Rebellion movement? I mean, they certainly, it was a very different class of people. You could no longer say those hippies or those troublemakers because it was actors and professionals and taking to the streets. It was such a fantastic movement.
It is. I'm a big fan, and I think Greta is the reason for this. Greta Thunberg has done more for raising the profile of climate change than any other human alive right now. And what I love about her is her directness, her honesty. We are very fortunate that she seems to be resilient because it's a hard place to be. It's also not fair that it's down to people like her. And she isn't the only one. There are plenty of youth activists. There are plenty of sustainability professionals who put their whole careers into this. We are all part of a group of people who have been pointing out something on the horizon, saying this is coming, we need to do something about it. And those outlaws get challenged by society. And I hats off to Greta. I have seen her.
I agree.
She came to Vancouver, and it was really nice to see her. And I just hope we can sustain her as a movement so that she doesn't end up burnt out and exhausted as the champion syndrome kicks in. But Extinction Rebellion is great. It's a great example of this because of the approach. And what else is usual is, as Greta said it beautifully, when she started getting personally attacked by fossil fuel companies and by politicians, she said, okay, that means I'm starting to win. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, that is tough. You got to be really tough to handle that. Most of us could not handle that, and And I think that we need to be doing what we can to try and help people like that make it through this as whole people, because if she collapses in exhaustion, that's not going to be helpful to anybody. So yeah, we got to support her. And Extinction Rebellion, I've been a big supporter of. As a professional in the field, I have to walk that weird fine line between how I can say what I want to say and tell the truth, but also be a professional, because I still have to pay the bills. And it's an interesting balancing act. As an outlaw, I've spent much of my life finding my way into systems, and most of the recent jobs I've done have been executive roles in mainstream systems, because I've had to play that game and I've had to assume that position and wear the right clothes.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to do if you want to affect change, because that's the point.
Teo, we got some questions from the audience. We've got sort of 15, 20 minutes to go. Anything coming in that's...
most people just commenting and agreeing with what we're saying, changing bank accounts for sustainable bank, avoiding big supermarkets, shop at local markets, create an allotment, grow your own food. Here, Scylla says, people realize how much power they have, in particular by choosing where they spend their money. Bob says, heal yourself, heal the planet, for our outer society is just a reflection of our inner one. I mean, so if you've got questions that you'd like specifically to ask Jae, this is a great time to type them into the comments, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on our Facebook page or our Facebook group. We can put those up there. Or
if I've depressed you so much you don't have any questions left, that's fine. We have to laugh about this, and that's the other piece.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true.
We gotta sit back in this process and sort of have a little giggle at ourselves of just how funny humanity is. Because these are all just weird choices we've made that have got us into these positions, and we can make other ones. It's within our hands. Whether we will or won't, that's the interesting piece.
Yeah. When are you moving to New Zealand?
I tried. I got voted down. My family wanted to come to Canada instead, but I actually wanted to go to New Zealand because that's exactly where I thought was the right place to be. And it has been interesting, because when I moved back to Canada 4.5 years ago, I moved back in time 15 years because of how far behind Canada is versus the UK.
Wow.
Yeah.
We did have an Indigenous lady on last week with us on a show, and that was quite an eye-opener, and it was quite interesting because I hate to say the name of your Prime Minister, but Trudeau did stand there, and he talked about, I think he was talking about the Black Lives Matter, and he was talking about the Black people of Black Canadians, and then he said racialized.
Yeah, I know, that's an interesting term.
And I thought, it's being totally hypocritical. Why can't you say the First Peoples, the First Nations, the original peoples of Canada? Really, I've just found that incredibly insulting. For they don't see much help, and it's frustrating.
There's a lot of talk. I mean, Canada is one of the few countries that signed up to the United Nations Indigenous UNDRIP regulations, so we are one of the few who have done it. British Columbia is the first jurisdiction in Canada to implement it in law. So we do those sort of things well.
So what is that you just mentioned?
UNDRIP, the United Nations Declarations of Indigenous Peoples. It's a global Indigenous Peoples' Rights Declaration. So Canada's done really well signing up to those sort of things. And
okay, but are they seeing, is it reaching the people in ways that they can, are practical?
That's a very good question. We are early days, and what I would say is this government's better than the last one. Okay. A lot better, but there's still a lot of talk. And what's happening in the United States isn't about Black people. It's about race. And race means a lot of different people. This is about mixed race people. This is about Indigenous people. This is about Hispanic people and Asian people. This is about people who are different than the majority. And that's one thing that's been interesting.
But even so, the first people there, the original peoples, I count as ranking above everyone else. Actually, it's their land. That's my personal feeling.
It is, and I agree. And what's happened in Canada is a lot more recognition of that. When I first came back 4.5 years ago, it was totally different from when I left 20 years before. where all government related things, everything to do with events, they all started by saying, we want to acknowledge that we are unceded territory of blah, 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 whichever nation it was. I mean, Canada's weird. We've got over 600 Indigenous First Nation groups. So it's not like New Zealand, which has one, the Maori. It's quite complex. In British Columbia alone, we have over 300 of the 600.
Wow.
Just up the road from me, where I live in Whistler, which is a famous ski resort, there are two nations there, the Squamish and the Lillooet. And the Lillooet and the Squamish languages are so different that it's the same as English and Chinese. And they evolved right beside each other. So linguistically, they're just nothing like each other. So there's so much diversity. It's
so clearly
really
they never
incredible.
traded or whatever together, otherwise their languages would have merged.
They did. They traded all the time.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
But they co-evolved completely different syntaxes for grammar and structure of language. I mean, it's insane when you think about it. It's like, wow, the diversity. So that's one thing that's really great, but it's also really challenging because what you end up having is there is not one voice. There are hundreds of voices, which have hundreds of different perspectives.
To negotiate with.
Yes, and so the government of Canada's tried to do sweeping things, but they never work because there are outliers or different perspectives, and so it's complicated, but it doesn't mean it can't be. It has to be put down. It means reconciliation is a complex thing. That it's like addiction. If you're an addict, you have to deal with the addiction challenge your whole life. Reconciliation, you have to deal with your whole life, and you're always reconciling, no matter what.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I have a question, please, because before we run out of time. Jae, we're entering the age of Aquarius. This is surely the golden age of the outlaw, as in finding new ways of being and doing. How do you see this happening, as it certainly doesn't seem to be possible through the existing political and governmental systems? How do you see the creation of these new systems?
Great question. And then, I like the golden age of the outlaw. I haven't heard that one yet. Thank you, Nikki, for holding that. That was great. You're doing some levitating. The only way new systems come about is because the old ones become obsolete. Unfortunately, they don't evolve very often. So we are going to see this as a Buckminster Fuller type concept, which is the best way to change a system is to ignore it and invent something that makes it obsolete. That's what's happening now, much more than working inside. And I have tried. I have worked in government. I have worked in local government in the UK, central government in the UK, the European Union. I've worked in not-for-profits, in for-profits, for corporations, as small businesses. I've done the whole gamut.
You're incredible, yeah.
But I'm just saying I've tried from so many sides. And what is apparent to me is that we just need to invent something that makes this obsolete. And that's what's happening already. We see it all around us. In the UK, there's beautiful examples. Lewis has been a leader. Brighton has been a leader. Bristol has been a leader. Totnes. These places have really changed. In Ireland, Kinsale, where the transition movement came from. So they're all over the world. You see pockets of these examples of places that have just really said, actually, look at this way of doing things. Tamara in Portugal, one of the most incredible sustainable communities. So it's just everywhere you turn. They're all around us.
I was saying to Teo, it would be interesting to have a long map of the entire world that's lit up by LEDs, and then suddenly it lights up with all the pockets of where the outlaw thinkers are gravitating towards all the alternative communities.
Well, there was this line that Machiavelli said, which is a bit depressing, but I think it's useful. Cursed be he who ever tries to change the existing system, because all you will ever get is lukewarm support from those who will benefit from the new and brutal assaults from all those who benefit from the incumbent. That is where we are. This is not an easy process.
No.
But we don't have a choice. So we have to get on with the business of living.
I mean, I suppose as we sort of come to the end of the program, all I can say is, Forest Road. Are you familiar with? Yeah, you've been to Forest Road.
That's right. East Sussex.
Yes, of course. And we have a little community here. It's not a grassroots community. I'd call it more of a middle class community, but Hoveley Hill. But we have a strong alternative community with lots of different alternative streams coming into it. And so, local rather than global, it seems that for us, Teo, and you feel the same, but that's what we hold on to. That's what we can build, is strength within our local community.
Yeah.
Yep.
We
In times of crisis, it's
from our
community.
farms, the 2 local farms, and support
Yep.
local farms.
There's a local group thinking about getting together to actually just buy a patch of woodland. Because actually you can put woodland in the United Kingdom, because you never get permission to build dwellings on it. No. It's a lot cheaper than if you're trying to buy land that you could build on. And actually set up an eco sort of little eco village with our own sustainable agriculture and bits and pieces 10, 12, 15 families do together, which is I love those sort of ideas.
Yeah,
and there's lots of them already. France is covered with them. Spain is covered with these small communities. Italy, same thing. So you've got pockets of examples of this around the world. The United States, should say Davis, California, a very forward-thinking city in the U.S. has been thinking about this stuff for a long time. So for me, it's really just trying to see what works for you, finding your way through this. The first thing you should do is make sure you vote. The second thing you should do is you should make sure you try to make sure your family and your friends at least vote, even if it's for someone who you don't agree with, because that's vital. The other one is use your money appropriately. Get your savings, get your pensions in the right place with organizations that actually build the world you want. Buy your things from the things that matter. But I understand if you don't have much money, it's hard to go organic. It's hard to go local. So the push there is to say, okay, what can you do when it comes to buying less of the bad and a little bit of the good? Where can you do that? And if all of us can go down different routes when it comes to choices. Learn some practical skills. One of the things that I was trying to get going in the UK when I was there was the Great Reskilling Project, which was about teaching people pragmatic, practical things, how to make things, how to grow things, how to fix things, the fix-it fairs. That stuff is actually really rewarding. And I think the COVID process has taught a lot of people who have suddenly been stuck at home for a couple of months. Maybe you've developed some new skills. Maybe you've reignited some hobbies. Maybe you realize that it wasn't lack of time was the reason you didn't do those things that are good for you. If you didn't do them, it's because of you. It's not because of time.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting world we live in, and I just like the fact that the dice are being rolled right now.
Yeah, really are.
I vote for a 7.
That's a good number. I like 7.
It's a good number.
I'm gonna bring this up because if you guys would like to find out more about Jae, you can go to carbonfreegroup.com. And if you look under the board there, you can read Jae's bio. He's also on LinkedIn, and he's got a little Facebook group called Sustainability Quotes that you can search for if you just search for Sustainability Quotes. And I'll put all these links into the chat now so that you can see those as well. And if there's new people here that have not seen our movie yet, you are still able to rent it for just $4.95. It's a fantastic film, 108 minutes long. That's the main reason why we have 27,000 people in our Facebook group and 40,000 people following us on Facebook, because they've seen this movie, and that's what brings us all together. And it's all about changing the sort of the collective consciousness of our planet. There's also a full digital access package. And every week we have beautiful people, sort of 5, 6, 7 people that will donate, anything between $5 and $50 to help us with our ongoing costs. I do say this costs us $1,500 a month in software alone to keep going. So, although we bring these live broadcasts each week for free, if you can help us with those costs, that really, really is beautifully received. And otherwise, just share the videos with others. So I'm going to take that down. But Jae, it's been fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing with us and for coming back to us after the little technical glitch in the middle.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You have vast knowledge, but it'd be interesting to come back to you in 6 months' time to see where we are, because things are just moving so rapidly. Who knows where we're going next?
Well, cursed be he and she. Sorry. Yeah,
we need to take it into our own hands.
We do. And there's that line, which is, cursed be he or she who lives in interesting times. Well, we do.
And hopefully you're going to maybe have some tools or something for us which we can share with people, but we'll let people know about that.
Excellent. Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. Sorry that we lost you, but we got you back.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Sorry, when I'm looking away from the screen, it's because I'm posting links and looking at different feeds because we're live on 3 different channels. So it's not because I'm not interested or not listening. I am listening intently. That's one of the
No
benefits
worries.
of having ADD. I can do 2 or 3 things at once, just not necessarily well.
Ah, well, that's all right.
If you just stay with us a moment, Jay. Thank you, everybody. That's love. Good night. And we will be posting tomorrow who we have coming up for Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday? Yes, Thursday.
So Thursday we'll be back to 8 p.m., not 8:15 p.m.
Yeah.
But you'll get it on the email. And if you're not on our email list, if you go to the Facebook page, there's a little button on that says subscribe, and it'll open up a form, and then you can jump into our email list, which will then let you know about these live talks in advance and give you all the links, and it gives you the links to watch any of the live talks that we've done previously. And then we've also we've got a lot of people. I mean, I said 27,500 people in the Facebook group. I'm just going to post this one little link here because if you want to come and join a beautiful community of people that are sharing lots of ideas, you're able to do that as well. So with that, I bid you good night. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Luna. And we'll see you on Thursday.